and welcome back. In today's episode, we are going to be breaking down a lot of really awesome things. Primarily, what are the key indicators that show us whether a player should go off and not? And this is a hard question because so many times there are players that flat out get lucky and the metrics don't give any indication, but because of the nature of math, that flukes happen. So what we want to go is try to eliminate the red herrings from the reality of who did good and who didn't. But as always at Local Football Flavor, we're always going to answer every question that gets submitted to us. And that's where we're going to start today as we weave in and out. So
But
Jackson, hitting us up with the first.
Joe, first I'd like to shout out everybody in the chat and everybody who watches.
Oh, yeah.
We appreciate the love. Whether your season is going great or not, or whether it's cut back, man, we're here for you. We're here to give you the stats. We're here to share our opinions. And to that point, Jackson here, I do believe that you have a chance tonight. Where this belief comes in at is all in Matt Stafford, right? Mm-hmm. Matt Stafford is one of those quarterbacks that could easily eclipse that 20-point realm, right? And if he does, the correlation is there, right, Joe? If he does, the correlation to Nacua or the correlation to Cup are there. So while I don't think it's going to happen, I don't think that it is as grim as, Jared Goff's night last night of 5 interceptions and 2 touchdowns.
Ooh, that was rough.
So while it's grim, I would not be upset yet. George, yeah. If you need to, it was not, and this is something, Joe, that we can talk about too when it comes to these 49ers running backs, is when it comes to the usage, is that head coach always uses the hot hand. And that has been true for a very, very long time. And primarily the hot hand is Christian McCaffrey. So as long as Christian McCaffrey is playing, Jordan Mason is not really worth the start. So if you needed to drop him, George, you can. If not, keep him as a hold. And I think Joe would kind of fall on the same respect, right, Joe?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, George, to this other pressing question. Traded Brian Thomas for Marvin Harrison, Joe. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's your boy, Bob, getting rid of one for the one you don't like. So fundamentally, fact is that Jacksonville's done. I mean, they're in trouble. And it doesn't look like they have any need to push Lawrence back. They've already paid him. They've already committed to him. The season's a bust. He's not going to have the same coach next year. And they also started getting rid of his offensive line. So do you really want to rush him back? Not so much so. And then we look at what Mac Jones just did. I mean, that was pathetic. I mean, I understand that Minnesota has a good offense, but there was nothing to it in that game. Now, granted, I understand overall yesterday, offense was down. Except for, I think, 2 games, offense was down pretty much across the league. Ironically, both of those games, including AFC North teams. But the point being is that I don't think I can be in Brian Thomas. I also don't think I want to be in Harrison either. I in terms of talents, the two of them aren't that far apart, but at least there's a reason to hope that Kyler Murray will give you performances like yesterday where he'll show up. I still think it's 1 out of every 4, and it's not worth banking on. But I know Mac Jones ain't going to give me anything. Mac Jones is playing for his career, and the best he could give you was a lunge for 1 touchdown. Couldn't move the ball when it mattered at all. I love Brian Thomas moving forward. I do not like him in a redraft league for here. So sorry, George. I don't mean to bury your trade there, but that's how I feel.
I fall on this that you got Marvin Harrison Jr. I like that. Now I don't really unequivocally am like a huge fan. Like Joe knows that I'm very hot and cold, and everybody watching right now knows that I'm very hot and cold about Marvin Harrison Jr. And the stats dictate that that is a reasonable expectation to make, is that tied to Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray did not have an amazing passing game yesterday. I believe he went 22 for 24, which is good for Kyler Murray for 222, but it wasn't like light years ahead of what he has done in the past in terms of a passer. Now, when you look at this team, they are primarily a rushing team. And so that needs to be taken into account. I was very high on Brian Thomas Jr. However, as long as Mac Jones or CJ Beathard is at the helm, it is reasonable to think that the production of Brian Thomas Jr. will fall off. And when you look at the matchups, at least over the next 4 weeks for Marvin Harrison Jr., it will be worth starting him in many of those matchups. So while, it's not going to be as much to start Brian Thomas right now with the injuries, it will be worth it to start Marv. So you got somebody that is at least for the next 4 weeks, a starter. Week 15, you might come into a problem town, but we'll see. Steve, need 13 points tonight from Achan. Think I get it. This will win, put me at 6-4, fourth place overall in the big money league. I really do think that Achan has the capability to be really productive this week, Joe. When you look at the reports and when you look at the stats that we've been looking at, one of the things that needs to be mentioned is that Miami's breakdown in terms of the offensive line production and their capabilities is tops, right? It's one of the tops in the league right now. The Rams don't necessarily give up a lot. The only thing that could hold you back from getting 13 points from Achan tonight is if they end up just plodding the ball with Kyren Williams, because Kyren Williams is not explosive at all, to say the very least. And the only way you don't get that tonight is if the ball is not in the Dolphins' hands. So it was a similar thing with Drake May yesterday as well, where, yes, Ramondre Stevenson could plod his way to 60, 70 yards, but will he have the opportunity to get there? So if this game ends up being one of those pass fests that the Rams could get involved in, it does favor Achan a little bit more. I do think that a reasonable expectation is Achan 15 points. I'm not really scared about that. I'm going up against Achan in the league, and I need him to score, I think, under 25. And Steve, to this extent, too,
DJ Moore. Long story short, Steve, that's reasonable for him to get 13.
Yeah, and DJ Moore and all of the Bears wide receivers, while metrics did point out that they could have had a good game, they are tied to the least I want to say volumatic, but I know that's not a word. Least volumatic quarterback. You look at it, and the only times where these wide receivers are worth playing is when you can reasonably predict that Caleb Williams will pass for 40-plus times. Because when you look at the stat sheets and you look at what came out yesterday, at one point in time, all of the wide receivers had 4 targets. That's it. And so when you look at the volume of targets, and you cannot when they sit there and let's say that for every target they're slated to get like a third of a point, right? If they're only getting targeted 4 times, you can't reasonably start them. Quentin Johnston and St. Brown are on better volume-based passing teams, along with Hopkins, that all 3 of them are better options at this point than DJ Moore. And it was one of the things that we discussed earlier in the season about the Chicago pass game. So we appreciate the love, Steve. Absolutely. Quincy.
Love it, Steve.
Kind of panicking on seeing Lamb, thinking about starting Jennings over him. Quincy, this is the thing. Lamb was still targeted a lot. But again,
he was.
When it comes to targets, these feel like almost like Khalil Shakir targets and Wan'Dale Robinson targets, is that the targets are there, but what will happen with them? And granted, Philadelphia's defense was going to be problematic for Cooper Rush in Dallas to begin with. CeeDee Lamb was dealing with an injury. Is it reasonable to start Jennings over him? Probably, given the right matchups. This week was a great matchup for Jennings. Would I go so far as to say that I'm ready to say that this week, Quincy? I don't think I'm ready to say it this week, but it is reasonable to think that going forward, that Jennings will take the place of what Brandon Ayuk should have given us as that wide receiver role on San Francisco. And with a healthy Christian McCaffrey, there will be a heavy dose of Jennings on a week-to-week basis. And Jennings right now is a volume-based wide receiver on a better passing team. So it's reasonable to think that it would be a better start.
Oh, infinitely better passing team.
Joe, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the reality of it is that I don't want to be down and out on CD because I still believe that CD is one of the most talented receivers in the league. He is. And you look at, he's still winning in his win rates. He's creating openness and separation. The fear I have, and I've never seen this in him before, so I don't think that this is profound to him as the individual. It's more of a situational fear, is that what happens if the whole team phones it in? Because they basically are out of it now. I mean, you look at
that's the T. Higgins fear.
They're in trouble.
It's the T. Higgins fear.
But this is the difference between Higgins and Lamb. Higgins isn't under contract. Higgins knows he's not going to be there next year.
Right.
Lamb is going to be there next year.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not.
So that's what I'm saying. I don't think I worry about it. When he gets upset, it's because they're not winning, and he knows he is their best bet to win. The concern I have for Lamb, it's all quarterback based. Where I worry is that, and everyone saw this coming, is that if they can't run the ball, what are they going to do? Yeah. I'm not worried about Lamb, and particularly with Jennings. You gave a decent analysis about why to like Jennings. I don't think he's going to get anywhere near what we thought for Ayuk. Ayuk was going to be a top 12 receiver had he not gone hurt. So I don't have Jennings up that high, but I still have him as finishing top 25. So I just have Lamb should have finished top 10. I still think he has a chance at it.
But here's the thing, and I know a lot of people that we're talking to right now, we traded into CeeDee Lamb for a decent deal. Dak got hurt. Mm-hmm. It happens, right? But the guy still had 10 targets, okay? So what we're going to need to see from Cooper Rush is we're going to need to see that the average depth of target for Cooper Rush, and we'll see what happens as the stats for this week come out. But if the average depth of target for Cooper Rush can improve, they're not going to be facing Philadelphia every week, Joe, right? And the team is struggling. There's no doubt about it, but they were struggling.
Well, that's true, but also the metrics that made Rush good the first go around when he only had one loss as a starter was the fact Zeke was in his prime and they could run the ball at 4.5 a carry. They're nowhere near that.
As I'm looking at it,
Cooper Rush was Brad Johnson. He's not a real quarterback that you can rely on.
Here's the thing, Joe. Looking at their next 3 games, 2 of them in particular stand out as games that, and I want to look at the time that Cooper Rush holds the ball before we get to the next comment here by Jesse. Texans have a good way of getting to the quarterback. Giants also have a good way of getting to the quarterback. Those are in the next 3 weeks. Very good pass rush. Commanders, we can look back at yesterday's game. So you look at that and you say to yourself, okay, if Cooper Rush is going to be successful, this ball is going to have to get out of his hands decently fast, and it's going to have to get to CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Tolbert, or Ferguson, right? Then you look at the next 3 games after that.
Well, see, that's the problem. I think Ferguson has not stepped up the way that he would. I think that's a big reason they did that trade.
But going down into this year, you have then the next 3 weeks after that, Bengals, Panthers, Bucks. All 3 of those teams not very good at defending the pass. So as I see it, you have 3 potential hard matchups for CeeDee Lamb based upon quarterback play and offensive line play, and 3 very good matchups.
Yeah.
Ultimately it comes down to what is San Francisco's matchups there on a week-to-week basis. But I still think, going with the best lineup matchup as possible, CeeDee Lamb still gives you enough volume and talent-wise that he is still a decent enough play on a week-to-week basis.
That's right.
Jesse here. I'm about to lose because I dropped the Eagles defense for Deontay, then picked up the Cardinals defense, then dropped them for Hill, then dropped Hill for the Bears defense. The optics were there on the Bears defense, Joe. The optics were there on the Bears defense that the Bears defense should have been good enough. But what Joe will tell you is that the first mistake of dropping the Eagles for Deontay was probably that biggest mistake there, Jesse, because we were on the fence of even starting Deontay last week because of, well, not really on the fence. We really didn't want to start him at all.
We were on the fence of keeping him on the roster last week.
Yeah, and so that's it. Always is a heartbreaker losing to a defense, but we've all been there. And the optics on defenses is really interesting, especially when you take it from a DFS standpoint. When you look at sacks and turnover potential, especially, and then neutral and positive game script, the Philadelphia defense, while they haven't been stellar all year, this was like the time to start them. And the disparity between DraftKings and FanDuel in their numbers was huge, huge. Mm-hmm. FanDuel had them as the number one ranked defense this week. DraftKings had them as like one of the least. So it's really interesting. And George, yeah, the schedule is good, but what I want to consider also is that Marvin Harrison Jr. has performed well in games where he primarily faces man coverage. And Kyler, for all of the things that Kyler sucks at, that is one thing that he tends to do well.
Which are many.
And it was frustrating because last week, prior to this game, it was another matchup that was supposed to favor Kyler and Marvin Harrison Jr. So we can take a look at those numbers as we go. And George, you know, your confidence in Kyler paid off. Out of the last 3 weeks, 2 weeks were good weeks. 1 week was terrible. So it's not so much that I believe in Kyler yet, but it is so much as there are some decent enough matchups on the schedule for Kyler. And, you know, it could be.
See, here's the thing with Kyler. Like, to put this very simply, he's better against man coverage because it's much, much easier to read. The problem is that when you play man coverage, it's very hard to stop against a running quarterback when he scrambles. So, it's easier for him to read. It's easier for him to run. So every defense in the world knows that 1 out of 4 teams that are good. It's teams that have to play man because they're incapable of doing zone. He's very projectable to be a problem town. It just is.
And Joe, to that end, Kyler Murray and Arizona and Chicago are 2 passing teams that are really difficult to own players from right now because the volume for certain players is so low. You would think that being who he is and the pedigree that he is, that Marvin Harrison should dictate more than 5 targets in a game. That did not happen because they're primarily leaning on the run. So that's the only thing that I have really on a weekly basis against Marvin Harrison Jr. And it's been true since the beginning of the season. Would you
don't rely on an enough player. That's why you run the ball.
Would you drop Algier or Bigsby for Estime?
How injured is Bigsby?
Yeah, I would have to wait until I know that Estime is going to be a waiver wire guy. I think it's worth considering dropping Bigsby. Even though he's a super talented player, it is worth it. But it all depends on if you want to tie yourself into Denver's running game. That's kind of the long and short of my opinion on that, Joe, is that if you feel, I own Estime in a couple best ball leagues. If you feel, Quincy, that Estime will give you the best chance in the stretch run to win, I don't think you're ever going to
start Estime. My fundamental thought is unless Bigsby's out, if you're never going to start him, I think I'm riding Bigsby. At least I know he's a starter. He's going to get the majority of the carries.
Well, but also here too, Joe, ignoring a lot of things here. if you just take the adjusted yards before contact of attempt, Denver ranks 12th. Okay. Where do we find Jacksonville? Where do we find Jacksonville on this list of yards before contact? 22nd. So,
that's Atlanta, true. They did just trade it. Yeah,
Atlanta
but it's a volume question. Would you rather have the one who's going to get the bulk of the carries or the second stringer?
But the thing is, Estime is turning out to potentially take over the Javonte Williams job. So if eventually it comes to the point that you believe that that's going to happen, now's the time to pick up Estime. Estime was probably a nice pickup last week if you could have afforded it, just because they had been talking about him in coach speak. But them Lions, man.
Woo! Oh, Nino, dude. The Lions are going to be in the Super Bowl. Like, if last night didn't prove that, I don't know what will prove it to you. I think the best playoff game of the year will be the same one that was last year when the Rams go to Detroit again, which I am calling, by the way, because that I don't know what round it will happen in, but they will go to Detroit. The Rams are not losing until they play Detroit, and no one's beating Detroit. So many teams quit at the third interception, let alone keep fighting through the fourth and the fifth. That is a gigantic testament. That game was crazy to watch. That is like the most intense defense versus what they should have been I have ever seen in the second half. That team had no right giving a shit, for lack of a better way of putting it, and all they did was bring it. That whole second half, that Lions defense was just amazing. And Houston, what are you doing? Like quite frankly, all you needed was 3 first downs. It was just not happening. To me, it was remarkable. You have Mixon having a head case on the sidelines, Strauss becoming Superman and not in a good way. It was the Lions got inside their head when they absolutely had no right to do it. Like, how about those Lions? The Lions are going to be in the Super Bowl, and unless they're playing the Steelers, I hope they win it.
I really love to see the tenacity of this group of Lions players, because you're right. 5 interceptions would take most teams out of the game. But the fact that you have a veteran like Goff who has made multiple errors in games before, but they have the tenacity on defense, they have the capabilities as a running team, and that attitude, that Dan Campbell attitude, that never give up, don't let them see, you struggle. And man, it was just, I feel bad for Houston at some point in time there. But I want to play Brees, but even with this nice end of season schedule, what are the chances they bench their studs down the stretch? Realistically speaking, CC, I don't think that this coaching regime right now, with Robert Saleh being fired a couple of weeks ago, I don't believe that they have the capabilities to do that. I do think
GM will lose his job.
They might give Braylon Allen more chances, but honestly, Joe was talking to me yesterday about the Jets being completely in implosion mode. And one of the things that was a struggle last week was and this goes to Jacksonville's question here too for CC. When you look at Minnesota and when you looked at the Jets on paper, the matchups and the stats backing it up pointed in the direction that Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams were going to have good games, and that Justin Jefferson should have had an elite game. But there is that regular kind of red herring in the NFL recently, where when we think that everything is going to go one way, it goes the opposite way. I don't know why it happens, okay? Games that you think are like Jacksonville should have been blown out of the water. But one of the things that need to be mentioned about Minnesota is their offensive line, right? They're dealing with a couple injuries there. Sam Darnold had a game that is forgettable, but he's had that once or twice this year as well. And from a pass catching perspective, you now saw 2 out of those 3 tight ends land basically in the top 15 tight ends this week in terms of scoring. So there is that capability that, and Aaron Jones got hurt again. So you look at it and you say to yourself, the pathway for Brees and the pathway for these studs, this is now from the perspective that mentally, this is something that the stats don't point to, right, Joe? From a mental perspective, where are these players' heads at right now? I'm not looking to give up on JJ anytime soon. And I'm disappointed by that matchup. But, and Joe can speak of this for the Jets, is I'm more concerned about the Jets from this week than I am about the Vikings.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about that, man. The Jets aren't playing for anything. So the thing with the JJ proof, CC, hitting to your second point here, is that when Darnold started the year on fire, I think he was the last quarterback not to throw two touchdowns in a game, and he made it halfway through October. Like, he just kept throwing touchdowns. Boom, boom, boom. And you are right. Jacksonville should have been that. Jacksonville also had, they're playing for their coach's career, which apparently is meaningful to them. I didn't think most people care about Doug Peterson that much, but apparently they do. And the other part about Jacksonville is that there's a very real chance that Minnesota, they'll never admit this, disregarded them. They're part of this club in the NFL with only 2 wins that basically the other team should be able to destroy. These 2-win teams are only beating each other, which is showing how bad they are. On a complete side note, to go down the 2 quarterback thing, why does New Orleans only throw deep passes in the first quarter and then stop chucking it to the person who's giving them touchdowns? They've been doing this all year long, regardless of who their coordinator is. It is so stupid. Sorry, that's the Saints last night.
But to that end, CC, as well, and it's one of the same reasons. It's one of the same reasons that I'm not concerned about CeeDee Lamb as well, is that
JJ is quarterback proof, though.
Three. This was not JJ's fault. 3 of the interceptions that Darnold threw, 2 of them being in the end zone, to who? Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson was always a part of this game script. He had 9 targets. TJ Hawkinson also had 9 targets. He caught 5. 3 of them were interceptions. So Darnold is targeting him by far and away one of the highest rates, if any wide receiver in the league. And at some point in time, yes, they were trying to give the game away at some point in time here. But
he really
was ugly. But this Minnesota defense, outside of that first touchdown, clamped down, right? And so it's not like Justin Jefferson gave up. And that's the reason why I'm not too crazy about, I'm not too upset, because the optics are still there for Justin Jefferson. It's not like they've gone away. Bones.
That's right.
It's good to see you. And everybody in the chat, we see all the questions. We're going to get to every question. We're just kind of talking today about some of the things that we noticed through the stats from leading
Monday
up to
recap,
and what we saw
Monday
in the actual
autopsies.
game. Bones, as far as it goes to Monday, and we can revisit this on Wednesday or Thursday when you join us, I think that we'll need to know a little bit about the injury situation for Najee, because he did miss a little bit of that game. When it comes to Dobbins,
but he returned to it, so
yeah, but still, it's something to look at. Dobbins now also has to contest with Gus Edwards on a team that's slightly passing the ball more. When we come down to the initial lean here, Joe, on Monday, just taking a look at a couple things real fast, it looks like.
I think, as in a vacuum, if the 2 were playing the exact same opponent, I would lean Dobbins, because I lean towards explosiveness. Najee has, I think, the biggest problem that could have happened to him on Sunday, which was Jaylen Warren's explosiveness is back. So when the Steelers needed to go get yardage, they weren't relying on Najee, even before his first injury, which, again, he eventually returned from. So as a general rule, I lean much more towards the explosive player than not, because Dobbins is much more explosive than the Gus Bus. I think the only real exception to this is how much I love Monty. But that being said, Gibbs is no one I would ever bench either. So in general, I want to have the more explosive player than not. I think that this year has really, really shown that that's the right answer. So if you're asking for my lean here on Monday, that's my general philosophical starting point as far as where I'd go there.
Yeah, and Joe, to that end,
just to put that out there.
To that end, too, looking at this week's games, you have the Chargers going or facing off against the Bengals, and the Steelers facing off against the Ravens, and that can. And I know divisional matchups for the Steelers and Ravens are always interesting performances, but I would be concerned that that this becomes a game that's a boat race, and Najee kind of gets taken off to the side, and his goes for like 15 carries for 30 yards. That would be my concern here, especially with Jaylen Warren in a game of this type and this caliber. The Bengals game, that could go either way for me. Joe Burrow could totally show out with Chase again, but I think it's more likely that Dobbins is more involved in that game than Najee in the Steelers game. But that's my initial line. I'll go Dobbins too, because he has the explosion in a game.
And I agree with that.
Recently high scoring. With Olave going on IR, who's to pick up? Mike Williams, Donnie Mitchell, Coach Coker. Three ways to view this here. One of the things to view is that Coker got targets, and we talked about this last week. It's going to be not a great offense to be a part of, but it's still an offense that is in the NFL with players that are on waivers, right? Mike Williams, on the other hand, Joe, and you can speak to Mike Williams because you were talking about him a little bit this past week. He looks like a good option, especially if they're going to throw rainbows at some point in the game. So as you listed it right there, I don't think I'm jumping.
Yeah, he looked a lot like Metcalf. The
Good.
So when I look at Williams, I will only want him. Not say I only want him, but I know his role is going to rapidly expand with Calvin Austin's lack of ability. Calvin Austin is basically on the Steelers as the deep threat, and there were at least 4 throws watching that game from the All-22 that he 100% caused the incompletion on by failing to adjust as the quarterback threw him open. So at the end of the game, instead of throwing him open, Russell Wilson put one knocked out of the game because he was throw where he is an elite receiver. He just has always been hurt. If Mike Williams never got injured, he would still be a Charger, and he'd be one of the highest paid receivers in football. There'd be no doubt in my mind about that. So there is no doubt of that list. He is more talented than the other 2 combined. So Mike Williams is the one I want to sit on because I think he gives you the upside potential that.
But here's the other thing. Here's the other thing too, Joe, is that if you are a fantasy player that looks for volume, and we'll have to get a few more samples from Coker, but Coker got 8 targets. Only caught.
I think Williams is going to get there. See, that's the thing. I think he's going to get it once he integrates the playbook.
William, I know, and so if you superimpose Calvin Austin's 6 targets, Mike Williams had 1 this week. If you say that on average Mike Williams will probably get 5, and Coker were to get 5, I would rather have the 5 targets of Mike Williams with Russell Wilson than the 5 targets of Coker with Bryce Young. So
absolutely,
there's reason that both of them could be valuable in the long term. But for everything that Joe said, if that comes to fruition, and it's speculative right now, but it is based upon facts that you see in film, that Mike Williams would be the reasonable play to go for over the other 2. Although Coker has the targets now, Mike Williams will most likely get more targets.
Mike Williams only had 2 practices with the Steelers. How much of the playbook you learning in that?
Right. That's what I'm saying. And we see your deep dive there. We're going to roll through all these quick hits here, and then we'll get to that one. Would I pick up Marquise Valdez-Scantling off waivers? He seems to be that Shaheed rule. Here's what I want to say, Jesse. Here's what I want to say. When you go back to the last time that Marquise Valdez-Scantling, and this was from an optics standpoint, we should have looked at this more as the week had gone forward. But when you look at the stats from the last time, I believe it was 2022, where Valdez-Scantling had a huge route share on his team. I think he ran 501 routes or something like that. His ADOT was at about 14. Now, when you look at Derek Carr, many people know him as the check down king. He does primarily like to throw the ball in situations that give his wide receiver a chance to win or to pass the ball to a running back. However, back in 2023, Derek Carr threw 64 passes that I believe were 15 plus yards or 20 plus yards, and a decent amount in that share. While Valdez-Scantling only had like 3 catches, right? And it's definitely a big boom kind of potential with Marquise Valdez-Scantling. I think that the chemistry from a stats standpoint is there enough to make Marquise Valdez-Scantling. I'm not going to talk him up a lot, but I think it makes him worth picking up, knowing that what Derek Carr can do if given time, because we know if he's not given time, he's just going to check it down. But if given time, he will pass the ball deep. But what I need to just get across is 3 receptions, 3 targets. That is, the volume isn't there. This is like that J-Mo Shaheed kind of conversation. So if you're comfortable rolling that out with
why did you give him the ball more?
Boom, right? Well, they're not going to give him the ball more because this is strictly, they're going to give Kamara the ball.
It's how Carr always has been. I feel like we saw that Shaheed line like 3 times. So, 3 catches, 100 yards, and a touchdown.
I do think he's worth picking up. I'm not expecting this every week, but I am expecting 3 receptions. And if it gets me 50 yards, it gets me 50 yards. I'm going to have to look at the matchups to see if he's worth starting, but this was a week that was worth considering, especially, Joe, when you look at the pressure rates of teams, and you look at Atlanta, and Atlanta was purely mid to bottom.
Yeah.
So they're not getting a lot of pressure on them. That screamed Marquise Valdez-Scantling, but we didn't see that.
Which is my point. Throw it to him more.
We didn't see that. CC, how do we feel about Jennings over a player like Flowers as a lineup block rest of the season? Basically looking for a smash flex. JJ and Cup are my starters. I think it's reasonable to think that both Flowers and Jennings have really high ceilings. Really high ceilings. We saw Jennings' high ceiling a couple weeks back in that game where he boomed really hard. And then we've seen Flowers' ceiling as well a couple weeks back. I think that both players it's going to come down to the matchup, and it's going to come down to what the average depth of target is for them, because Jennings is a wholly different player, in my opinion, than Flowers is. And he does different things than Flowers, and Jennings' roles on this team are different. Where they play at on the field,
and they need to be because their quarterbacks are so different.
Right.
I don't know if either one of them is significantly different than the other, though. So if you're talking about going out and making a move to get one or the other, it's probably not worth the cost you're going to spend to do the switch, because both owners are going to feel their piece is worth more than the other. But the reality is they're basically the same guy in terms of production. So I'm not making a move. If you have both of them, I'd probably move one of them to do the upgrade, but that's where I'm at, because you're definitely starting Jeff and Cup. I mean, there's no way around that.
Yeah, there really isn't. And that's why I'm not you're in a good spot, CC.
You're in a great spot.
You have a plethora of wide receivers there that are going to take you to, some really good. It's just all on that combination. Like, what is the combination that I go with on a week-to-week basis? And we can definitely talk more about that too. Would I trade Pollard for Ridley or Ladd? So you know and Jason, you've been with us long enough to know that I have a lot of disrespect for Ridley. But what I do know is I can't disrespect volume. I can't do it.
No.
And it's the same reason that I can't disrespect London's volume or anybody else's volume. When you are getting targeted, and this is the thing we joked about, that Calvin Ridley came out a couple weeks back and saying, they should have targeted me more. And Joe pointed out that the targets that he did get that were in the stat line did not kind of match because they were bad. It wasn't actually even to him. It was just in his general area. If he's going to get targeted at the rate that he has been over the last several weeks, I am okay taking on Calvin Ridley. I do also think, and Joe will talk a little bit about McConkey, that McConkey is definitely worth keeping as well. Pollard dealing with an injury, dealing with some injuries, as we pointed out a couple weeks ago, that this was probably going to happen coming into the back half of the season. I'd say that's dealer's choice for me. If you think that Ridley's going to keep, because again, it's a worse quarterback. Okay. Definitely worse quarterback on a worse offense. So just take that into consideration. But 9 targets is nothing to scoff at. Ladd only had 2. Now that's not going to happen every week. And Quentin Johnston only had 2. The tight end had a little bit more. It's not going to happen every week. But again, Justin Herbert didn't pass the ball a lot this game because this game they pretty much had the lead from the beginning, other than the touchdown early from Ridley, and they never gave it back up. So there was no reason to pass the ball more, right, Joe?
Mm-hmm.
So I think for the Titans, they're going to have to keep passing the ball to
That's
win.
right. That's exactly right.
They're not going to. So I'd rather have Ridley, and I hate that I say it, but I'd rather have Ridley over Pollard. And
I'd rather have Ladd.
Yeah, both are good. Ayush, I keep starting the Lions defense every week. They just do not let me down, and I love it.
Oh yeah,
I love it for you. It's nice to have a reliable defense that does a lot of things. Minnesota's up there. Chargers have been good enough. It's just nice to have. And Victor, I got offered Josh Jacobs and Kyle Pitts for James Cook. I have Mike Gesicki. Do I take it? Victor, I think you're getting good enough value there. But one of the things that we pointed out last week, Victor, is that in negative game script for the Packers, Josh Jacobs is not as involved. As you take a look at their upcoming schedule, let's take a look at their schedule here. You've got to kind of look at it and say, okay, what games are they going to be playing with a lead? And what games are they going to be behind? Packers versus Bears, they're probably going to be playing with a lead for some of that game. Packers versus Niners, probably playing catch up. Packers versus Dolphins, dealer's choice. Packers versus Lions, probably playing catch up. Packers versus Seahawks, probably winning. Then Packers versus Saints, December 23rd. So that's the beginning of the playoff, or that's the middle of the playoffs for some people. So as you look at it and you say to yourself, okay, 2 out of the 4 games that they have playing coming back up here, I can see Jacobs having a good role, at least at the back half of those games. He could have a great early half of those games, right, Joe? But it's kind of, again, it's dealer's choice on what's going to happen. And then Buffalo, Cook had a great game in terms of the stat sheets, but they're not one to always rely on James Cook. You have Chiefs, Niners, Rams, Lions, Patriots coming up on the schedule over the next 5 weeks. And those are going to be hard-fought games that Cook is probably going to be involved in a lot. As it goes to Mike Gesicki, Victor, we talked of this last week as well. Mike Gesicki was one of our guys. The volume was there. Mike Gesicki's volume was there. The tight end volume for the Bengals was there, but it was not Mike Gesicki's night, which was absolutely unequivocally disappointing for all of us that started Mike Gesicki. But the volume was there.
That's because he didn't bring him home. There were targets. There were opportunities.
And
he just didn't bring him in.
the red zone. The optics were all there. Would I do this? I would consider it, especially because of that. Kyle Pitts moves you into a more reliable tight end, which is not something we've said about Kyle Pitts to this point in his career. He's been a more reliable tight end for us this year outside of the Cowboys game. So if you are looking for a more reliable tight end, I think it's reasonable to think that this trade is as balanced as it can be. How do you feel about it, Joe?
Yeah, no, I don't think you're getting enough for it. Let's just start with that. I get that you have Gesicki. I want to get a little bit more to Cook. I mean, Bob just went down the answers why, but that's how I would want to look at it. So that's my gut feel when I look at this trade. I don't think you're getting enough for Jacobs and Pitts.
Well, he would be giving up Cook.
Well, either way, I think you should be getting more in return.
Yeah. And Victor, in terms of what defenses, this is something we can look at a little bit more as the week goes
on. So on our defenses, I just went through that. Both Miami's on our short list, and so is the Rams. So to give you the 5 short list, it's going to be Minnesota, Rams, and then it's going to be Houston, Miami, and the Jets. So Rams being the number 2 in terms of what we project points against them being.
Which is nice.
Yeah, nice. Well, you play New England. It's kind of easy to shut them down.
Does 8 wins get you in the playoffs? It can.
For fantasy, it does, yeah.
Yeah, and it definitely can. It depends on the structure of your league and how you carry out the season. But absolutely, 8 wins gets you into the playoffs. This year, in terms of the NFL, Joe, does an 8-win team get into the playoffs?
It also might. The last seed of the AFC is going to be bad. Whoever wins the AFC North is going to crush that team. But or maybe Buffalo. I don't want to guarantee the AFC North beats out Buffalo. But whoever is the 2-7 seed will be the biggest spread of all the wild card weekends. That last seed of the AFC is bad, bad, bad. Mm-hmm. Hey, Bob, the last seed in the AFC is going to be bad.
Yeah. That's not crazy, right? It's not crazy.
It's so bad. But it could be it could be an 8-win Miami. I mean, the Jets aren't even mathematically eliminated yet. It could be the Bengals. Like, dude.
Quincy here. Tracy is on a bye. Damn, does Tracy look good, man? I mean, that guy.
He does.
That guy looks different. He looks different. The fact that at the beginning of that game, I texted you, Joe, and I was stat watching that game because I had to do some things at home. But the fact that I was like, how in the world does
it's hard to watch 12 hours of football?
How does
get away with
not have more? How does Tracy not have more runs? They were running Devin Singletary in the first quarter of that game, and everybody was screaming like, "What are you doing? Like, what is you have a beast and you're going to a journeyman running back? Like, that's absurd." But I have Kyron, Corum, Bigsby, Algier. Would drop Corum for Estime or keep what I have if I'm in first. I think it's reasonable, Quincy. You asked us if it's worth picking up Estime. I do think that Corum's not giving you enough. I mean,
that's fair.
He is by far in the most out of these situations.
See, I want to keep Corum for his build though.
Well, that's
if Kyron goes down, his team's screwed.
So Quincy, this is what I was about to say. Is that the best situations from a running back perspective right now is Algier, then the Rams running backs, and then Bigsby from your situation. Okay?
Yes.
So, and not including Tracy. So as I look at it, if I'm going to drop one guy for 1 week and I'm not going to be really sad about losing him from your perspective, it would probably be Bigsby out of that grouping.
In regards to the cut, you're not starting Esme anyway, so maybe I'd sit on him.
Yeah, I mean, you could.
That'd be basically just my thoughts of it there.
You could. All right, let's keep it moving here. Quincy, would you drop Bigsby, Corum, or Algier for Spears or Gus? Now, this is a different question.
That is a different question.
I think that when we look at the two situations for both the Chargers and for the Tennessee Titans, that at some point in time in this season, it depends on what we're looking at here. Spears is going to take on a bigger role. We already saw them say that they want Pollard to have less of volume, keep him healthy a little bit more. He's already struggling with a couple of injuries. Would I necessarily want to drop any of these three for those two? I would consider dropping Bigsby for Gus. Now, I know Gus's volume is going to be problematic, but it's on a team that is committed to running the ball. And right now, I can't trust the commitment of anybody from Jacksonville Jaguars. So that is a personal opinion based upon what we see in the stat sheets. Gus isn't going to really get you much, I don't think, on a week-to-week basis, but he's probably going to get you about the same points as Bigsby could get.
Yeah. Alrighty, Bubba has a little freeze out here with the Wi-Fi down in the basement. It was reassuring to see how much Laporta got targeted last night. Could it be possible that the mad scientist plan to unleash Laporta in the second half of the season? I want to trade him, but now CC, dude, I get where you're at. I get that it is a thought that is concerning, but as we look at this and just say, hey, Laporta had so much talent last year. He had so much volume. I'm thinking it might be a great time to buy low into Laporta. He might be resurrecting. He might be coming back, and we'll just see where it's at. So I'm okay with that as far as sitting with him. I don't think it was conscious by design because they still have been given a lot of gimmicks to him, but I really do like where he's at here. Laporta looked very good last night. That's right. Trade with someone and got him. Dude, yeah, getting rid of Njoku for Laporta is a massive, massive win. Big ups on you for doing that. Is Mason a drop now? Need other roster spots, and one doesn't inspire me to keep him. So I don't think he is a drop, and here's why. McCaffrey gets hurt. You're one McCaffrey injury away from him winning you playoff games. So I'm figuring someone else on your roster that needs to go. The boom potential of Jordan Mason if CMC goes out again is astronomical. So especially knowing that effectively because of the reduced workload he's about to have, he's just going to get stronger when that time comes. So I do not want to be dropping Jordan Mason. Was that?
I don't know what just happened to my screen. I have no idea. It just like
the internet hated you, man.
Everything froze.
So could it be possible to do the same with Happen Laporta? I don't want to be the guy last year giving away Njoku. I think Laporta's going to go off, dude. I don't know how else to tell you that. I am on the bus that Laporta is there. He's been given decent targets. And quite frankly, I think that we're going to get to a spot where he's going to be tearing up. But I'm not in the camp that says it was by design so they could hide him. But I do think he's going to tear it up. This
so
is
Joe,
an ad to your DD here. Dude, we're going to
here.
Let's do it.
Let's get up into that Ayush's DD, and then we'll finish off those quick hits there. So you're 6-4, 12-man full PPR. Teams right there have Tracy, Tua, Leggett, Mostert, Braylon Allen on the bench. You got an offer for trading Chase Brown, Zay Flowers, and Pickens to get back Amon-Ra, Tank, and Etienne and Coleman. Do I pull the trigger? Ayush, I wouldn't. You are sitting here outside of Amon-Ra. You are sitting out here with clearly the better options right now. And I'm going to tell you a little bit why these players are the better options. We just saw...
Yeah, you need to do some explaining here, my man.
We just saw... what, me?
Yeah. How are you explaining not to take a mock?
Amon-Ra is one of those players this year, Joe, and we can go into these stats for Ayush here to kind of lay it out. Is that I'm not saying that Amon-Ra is not worth owning. Okay, that is not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that when you look at from a game by game basis, he is getting a good amount of targets. He's gotten a touchdown in almost every single game he's played in. Okay. But how I feel about Amon-Ra is that the yardage for me for him is not there. And if I have to look for an Amon-Ra touchdown on a week to week basis to put him into the stratosphere of wide receiver one territory, while he's doing that right now, you got to ask yourself, is he going to continue to do that over the next couple of weeks?
I think the second half of last night showed they have to do that. So I'm going to go with yes.
That's absolutely fair to assume that. And what I said about Amon-Ra last week is still true, is that the Lions have many ways to beat you. And one of those ways is Amon-Ra. The targets are undeniable, right? But when I'm looking at this trade, I'm looking at it from all of the assets perspective, okay? Not just Amon-Ra. Tank is a great player, will have good games and will have bad games. We know.
And I think he'll be much better as the number two. I think with Collins back, he's going to ball.
Right now, it doesn't feel worth investing in the Jaguars offense at all.
No.
Trevor Lawrence injured. Etienne is not useful. And as it goes for Keon Coleman, we have seen now for 3 weeks where Amari Cooper has been nagged by a wrist injury, and it is a similar-ish wrist injury that Keon Coleman has. So right now, you are giving up 3 bona fide every week starters for 1. Okay?
No, for 2. I think Amon and Tank individually beat their counterparts of Zay and Pickens.
I don't think that what you're getting. So here's how it is in my head. Okay. This trade feels like Chase Brown, Zay Flowers for Amon-Ra, and Pickens for Tank, if I'm looking at it from a lineup perspective. Okay.
I would do that.
I understand that you are way higher on Amon-Ra and way lower on Chase Brown than most of the fantasy community is.
Okay? I might be.
But I don't think you can put Chase Brown's recent production into a conversation to say that production will not continue to happen now with Zach Moss out for the year. Even with Khalil Herbert in. You're looking at, since Zach Moss being out, over 40
I just see Herbert eating into Chase Brown. I also see the here's where it could save Chase Brown is they want to save Herbert. So they just start handing the ball off if they're out of it. But if that's the case, if they're not chucking to a Herbert, I don't think Chase Brown's got much value anyway. So that can't be a one-dimensional running team.
It's not. But the team they're losing games, but they're playing offensively. They're playing well. And
they're losing games because of their defense. Ain't no one fighting that.
Right. And so what I'm saying is that from this perspective here is that looking at your team, you do have the capability to move off of Chase Brown. Okay. There's no doubt that you have the capability of moving off of Chase Brown. But when I look at your finalized team here, while on paper this looks amazing, you have 4 bona fide studs at various positions: with Allen, Saquon, Hill, and Amon-Ra. But I worry.
Dude, this is the definition of cutting the fat to get your studs. I don't get why you're against it.
I'm against it because of that. You've made the top half of your roster really great. And I'm not going to say that it wouldn't.
Playoffs.
But I'm looking here at Keon Coleman. And if I am...
Well, Dell would be his starter, not Coleman.
No. Keon
Dell would have been his flex.
Would be the flex with Mostert and Leggett. If I look at this, And I say, Joe, I would rather roll.
No, Dell, he doesn't have Dell listed. So it would end up making it where he would end up having Tracy as his second running back.
But I'm going to ask you this, Joe. This is what I'm going to ask, because this is a deep dive.
And then his flex is going to be Dell. I love that team.
I get why you love it, and I'm not saying that I don't love it. But what I'm communicating is this. If you can roll out a lineup from a point-by-point standpoint here, Josh Allen, and you're a running back guy, okay? You're a running back guy. Josh Allen, Saquon, Tracy, Chase Brown as your two running backs in your flex, Hill and Pickens as your wide receivers. Tell me the reason points-wise that this trade has to be made in the quantity that it's being made.
Because first off, I believe Tracy more long-term than Chase Brown is a starting point. It gets Tracy into your starting lineup. And then the question becomes straight up, Zay and Pickens, is that bigger than Amah and Dell? And I say that's a hard no. I think Dell's going to outscore Zay possibly for the rest of the year. Baltimore, you look at Baltimore's schedule, they basically just showed the league they could basically lose a shootout. They got lucky, but they should have lost that shootout. They're going to go so hard into the King Henry basket that they're not going to let Lamar throw the game away. And quite frankly, when they played the rest of their division, that's what they do against Cleveland and Pittsburgh. They have two games left before the end of the fantasy football against the Steelers. So those are two basically non-Zay games. The Steelers tend to not do anything with their receivers during those games as well. So of the remaining games, we're in week 11. The playoffs end in week 16. So 4 of the remaining 6, I don't get, or 2 of the remaining 6, a third of the remaining games, those 2 options aren't going to produce anything. Amah and Dell don't give me that problem. And Amah's better than both.
But
so if you don't like Dell in it,
here's my question though. And this is something that I use is coming down to is that I think this trade can be better constructed. Okay? Because in my personal opinion,
Coleman's just going on your IR. What's wrong with the trade? Why rock the boat if you got a winner in your hand?
That's what I'm saying. He already has a winner in his hand.
No, I'm saying the trade is a winner. I'm saying that this trade is a winner. Just take it.
I disagree.
Give me Amah and Tank.
I disagree. You're totally,
yeah, right. You're probably cutting ETN, but whatever.
But I get where you're going at in terms of game script potential and games, but you're completely disregarding George Pickens in this potential lineup because.
Well, I also think Mike Williams is going to take away from George Pickens too. George Pickens, part of his peak was he had no competition as a number 2 receiver. Mike Williams is that and then some.
So I'm going to hit you with this then.
I think we might have seen the peak of Pickens. That's part of what I'm saying.
I'm going to hit you with this then, okay? So Detroit's sitting here at 8-1, okay? The next 2 games on their schedule are absolute cupcakes in the Jaguars and the Colts. Then they have Bears, Packers, Bills, Bears, 49ers, Vikings. All games that they want to win. Dan Campbell will not pump the brakes at all. But I have to ask you this, that if we have not seen a Dan Campbell coach team sitting here today with the record that they have right now. And so I've got to ask, if they win these next 2 cupcakes and are sitting there at 10-1, and they have reasonably the very best team that has the potential to do so many things to other teams without using Amon-Ra to the degree that they could.
Mm-hmm.
From a points differential standpoint, I want to know, and this goes to everybody who's in the chat right now too.
Well, this is the fun of my answer, Bob, is that last night they showed they need a Ma to be the dude. That comeback was really a Ma-centric. And the other part is, even at 10-1, you haven't clinched anything yet. He's not sitting anyone down until he has that bye guaranteed.
It's Tank Bigsby there, Joe. Tank Bigsby.
Oh, then you're definitely not doing that trade.
he loves Tank Dell so much. But to that degree, right? Even if
I do love Tank Dell so much.
Even
you're not doing that trade for Tank Bigsby.
Yeah, no. I mean, but even if you were doing it for Dell, I don't think I'd do it. I mean, I like what you have.
I would have done it for Dell
with Chase, Zay, and Pickens. Too much, because I don't want to think about rocking in my flex Coleman, Leggett, or Mostert on your team specifically.
No, you don't.
Okay, I don't want to think that going into the back half of the season.
Now to get the simplified version, I don't mind doing Pickens or Zay plus Chase Brown for an upgraded receiver. I'm not opposed to that. You're not getting to a Ma with just those two, though.
No, and Ayush, that's basically my arguing point, is that while Joe is okay if you were to have, Coleman in the flex and Amon-Ra as your second wide receiver instead of a combination of Zay or Pickens, I think that Leggett's value, while Leggett is potentially can have some really good games, there is always a very good chance that he'll put up his ceiling is not the same as the ceiling for Zay Flowers, in my opinion. His floor is very much similar to Zay Flowers. So that's the piece that I'm coming at that from, where Keon Coleman's ceiling could get you into the ceiling of Zay Flowers and the ceiling of George Pickens. But when you think of these players from a ceiling perspective, none of those players in my mind even crest the volume that Chase Brown is getting right now, and even gets where the volume is for Pickens right now. If you want Amon-Ra, I'm okay going out and getting Amon-Ra, but I would try to do something different in order to move into him.
But Pickens is the piece to move, though, because you are at his peak.
That's fine. AT, I'm thinking about trading Bowers or Andrews for a wide receiver since Olave's out. Should I be keeping both of them? I'm looking to target Higgins or Metcalf. This is worth trading away since they're injured. I would target Metcalf, and I think it's reasonable to think that right now, with the way tight ends have been performing, that you could move Andrews and maybe a little extra piece to move into Metcalf right now. I think the Metcalf owner will have held him out for a long time now, might not see the road that's ahead. And I think you could do something to get that. I wouldn't move into Higgins. I don't think Higgins is worth moving into. And Joe has explained numerous times why it's not worth moving into T. Higgins.
Not worth moving into Higgins.
But Metcalf is worth it. And the reason Metcalf is worth it. What?
Metcalf is so worth it.
The reason Metcalf is worth it is still that Seattle is one of the highest passing volume teams. And if you can have a passer from one of the highest volume passing teams, yeah.
And Metcalf is certainly the most important player on that offense. There's no way around that.
Juan, who would you keep, Baker Mayfield or Darnold? Moving forward,
Darnold, he's throwing the ball to J-Jeff. They're about the same in remaining schedules. The J-Jeff factor cannot be ignored.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking Giants, Panthers, Raiders, Chargers. Yeah, I mean, outside of those two Panthers games, which are probably going to be really nice for Baker Mayfield, it seems that Darnold would be a good play too. I really do think value-wise, these players are fairly much the same, like you said, Joe.
They are, but the J-Jeff tiebreaker is massive.
The J-Jeff tiebreaker is really good. And then you look, they play Tennessee, which is a decent enough passing defense of a team. Bears, decent enough. I mean, the schedule dictates, Joe, that Baker Mayfield would be the better selection, just based upon the need to pass it. But I do think with the potential, we don't know the injury status of Aaron Jones right now, But if Aaron Jones were to go down for any significant period of time, Darnold is going to have to sling it because Ty Chandler isn't it, and Cam Akers isn't it. Should I trade Hopkins, Kraft for Kyler Murray and Tillman? Current QB is Darnold, full PPR. It's definitely worth considering. Joe will tell you many reasons why Tillman is worth keeping around.
King of the garbage.
Getting. The only fear that I have with Tillman is because Jameis Winston was the third option, is if Dorian Thompson-Robinson or something else happens that now Winston isn't that option. We've said it since the time that Tillman was available or what we were thinking about picking Tillman up, is that Winston excels at throwing the ball to a guy that plays in his position. And Tillman is talented enough to excel with Jameis Winston. Would I do this trade? I do think it's worth considering that this trade will be worth it, but I don't really need Super to move into Kyler Murray right now.
That's the part.
So if I could get a deal done to get Tillman and didn't have to move into Murray, I can see you like, if I want to get into
Murray, I get why you want Murray. You want that upside of being there. The problem is Murray's going to give you so many down games. He's going to cost you more than it's going to help you. Mm-hmm. So if I were you, I would want to put a different position in there instead of Murray. Go give me a quality another piece, because quite frankly, Darnold ain't that bad unless you're in a super flex. If you're in a super flex, do it. But if you're not, don't.
And here's some of his team here with Bijan, Brees, Neighbors, and DJ Moore and Amari Cooper as well. So like I'm sitting here thinking, Super. If I want Murray,
you're not going to play them.
Yeah, I don't really want like Tillman. Like,
given how stacked the rest of your receiving room is, keep Kraft for the insurance policy.
I mean, Tillman would start over DJ Moore for me.
Well, yeah, that part's not in fight, but that's also his fifth receiver. But he's not going to start him over Neighbors.
Hopkins would also probably start over DJ Moore for me too. So,
yeah,
it's if you want the quarterback, I think it is a fine enough trade value-wise to do. If you,
I think you're going to hurt your brain every Sunday if you put Kyler Murray on this team, and right now you're not in a space of pain.
If I put Kyler Murray on this team, that I would just unroster Darnold, so that I wouldn't even have to think about it, and I can just enjoy the pain. Because that's similar.
Yeah, if you can swap, if you can make it Hopkins and Darnold for Murray and Tillman, I'm on that bus. You probably get that through.
Yeah. Ayush, would you guys do the trade Chase Brown, Pickens, Leggett for Amon-Ra? This man just keeps arguing me for giving Zay instead of Leggett, but I don't know. I will probably give him Leggett instead of Pickens. Okay, this is a totally different framework than Ayush. If I only had to give Chase and even if it was Chase, Zay, and Leggett, or Chase, Pickens, and Leggett, I would be okay with that, because then I could float Zay into my flex. And I think I'd be, from a stat sheet standpoint, I think that Zay is a more, well, he does have the same boomer bust times as Keon Coleman. He is a much safer option there.
Oh, so it's, yeah.
Or even Pickens. I think that's dealer's choice on which one you would rather have long-term, Ayush. I would do that. I hate giving up Chase Brown, but to move into Amon-Ra, that trade makes more sense than moving into the Jacksonville backfield plus a hurt Keon Coleman. Would you all be scared to start CD if Trey Lance is the starting quarterback for the Cowboys?
I'd be very scared.
It's reasonable to think that it's worth being scared about. The last time we saw Trey Lance, Joe, when was the last time?
He had one play for like negative 16 yards yesterday.
Hold on. I'm curious about this. When was the last time we saw him in like a full game?
I don't think we
6
ever.
passes, 21 yards. Let me see his stat sheet here.
Listen, the bottom line is this is not like Tim Tebow, where he was a horrible practice player, but then knew how to game. Trey Lance doesn't know how to do anything. Trey Lance is the reason everyone knew Anthony Richardson was going to suck, except for apparently Indianapolis. He's inaccurate. He can only run, and he's not that quick, if you get what I'm saying. So I don't want him anywhere near an offensive playbook that needs to become more complicated as it becomes less talented. So no, Trey Lance is incredibly scary to me. I am scared out of my mind, and I'm not happy about it. But I also know that CeeDee Lamb is infinitely more valuable than what I'd get in return for moving him right now. So it's a scary ride. It's probably as smart as your average teenager in a Hollywood horror movie around Halloween, but you got to do it.
I like that comparison. Jesse, we do see your deep dive still up there, Jesse. We'll totally get to it. The only thing scaring me in this trade is if Herbert could take over Chase Brown's workload by a lot. It just gives me the security of Amon-Ra. And this is what Joe was saying, right? Is that the security of Amon-Ra can't be understated. But
no,
it can't. There is reason to believe that there's absolutely no reason to say that they'll start pumping the brakes on Chase Brown.
No.
Okay, like there's no reason to say that that's going to happen. So
no, it's definitely going to happen because they've already said they can't keep giving the ball this much. That's why they went out and did that trade for Herbert.
I understand. I get it, but it's the passing game work. It's the other work too. And we said, why that's valuable for them. I'm okay with it. I mean, if I'm trading Chase Brown and either Pickens and Leggett or Zay Flowers and Leggett or Pickens, any of that combination, I'm okay with, but I don't want to give up both of those wide receivers in Pickens and Zay. That's all that is one of the primary, if you're going to move into Amon-Ra, I would rather have the security of Pickens or Zay rather than the security of Leggett or Coleman. That is one of the primary.
That's fair.
One of the primary points there. And to the other end of it too there, Joe.
And to the point, I was only okay with that trade before because I had your wrong tank there. But when it was going to be Dell in my head, it made sense. But that way you have written there, Bob's exactly right. You need to still have one of those two as your flex.
Who should I pick up off waivers? I need another solid wide receiver. Might trade DJ Moore. I would trade DJ Moore one.
Sure, that's not a might.
I have Jefferson, Myers, Downs, Mooney on the waiver wire is Wan'Dale Robinson, Scantling, Pierce, Atwell, Jennings, or Bateman.
Juwan Jennings should be on your team.
Yeah, I would order it. I would order it in this perspective here. Number one is Jennings. Okay, because Ayuk is hurt, he's not coming back this year. The role is defined. Number two is the fact that I think Marquise Valdez-Scantling will be worth rostering. I don't know what the volume will look like, but if you are simply playing flex, boom or bust, he gives you a really marked improvement over most boom or bust flex plays.
So I think I'd rather play Downs as a boom or bust than Scantling.
Right, but I'm saying is that
I don't want to put two of them on my roster. He already has Downs. It's a better version of it.
That's fine. That's why I'm saying he's number 2 in my order. Number 3 in my order is Wan'Dale. Wan'Dale's volume is still there, but it's a low ADOT, low volume. So it's a super low floor, and he doesn't crack the other 4 wide receivers you got on your team. Pearsall, I'm not sure what Pearsall's role will be. He caught a touchdown, but I'm really not sure what that role will be. And Bateman, I am a little bit concerned about how Deontay Johnson will affect Bateman's role. Okay. I wasn't high on Bateman going into the season. And with the Deontay Johnson arrival,
never liked Rashad Bateman.
But the question is, with the way that team was built, why would you go after Deontay Johnson at the trade deadline if you believed in Rashad Bateman long term? I don't get it.
I don't understand why they went I don't understand why they went for DJ. Period. He's not a schematic fit for them.
That's what I'm saying. It doesn't track. So in my mind, Jenny and Atwell's Atwell's okay, but not on the radar because both of the Nakua and Cup are back. So
and one to simplify, Jennings the only one worth doing, but I don't want to cut either Mooning, Downs, or Myers to get them.
Yeah, I wouldn't cut any of them. But I would trade DJ Moore. I would trade DJ Moore.
100% trade DJ Moore.
I would have traded him 4 weeks ago. Quick hit. Need Achane and Hill or Waddle to score. Do I win?
So you need 3 or 2 of those 3 to give you a touchdown. Probably.
Yeah, and that's the thing, Mick, with the playing Waddle if Hill outforce me to start Rome because of that. It sucks. I mean, it sucks. I had Rome in a couple DFS lineups because I was hoping for a larger passing game for Caleb Williams, but that did not turn out. Because against the Patriots, it's possible that was going to happen. It didn't turn out like that. That was an ugly game. It's disappointing that happened, but we answered Steve Garza's question a little bit earlier. We do both think that Achane does well tonight. And it's very possible that Achane is able to put up 15 plus points, if not 20 plus points.
And make a more comfortable Achane does it than the receivers.
Yeah. And then Hill or Waddle, I think that whichever one plays is probably going to get 4 or 5 receptions and 60-ish yards. So you're at least looking at 10 points there. So I think it really all comes down to Achane for you this week. You're welcome, Super. Thoughts on the Bears players rest of the season? Super. I see that you probably just joined us this week. We are one of
Hit that subscribe button, baby.
We are one of the fantasy people, community partners out there that we are not in on the Bears overall as a passing team. Darkside will tell you this if he's in the chat at all. The volume is not there to trust a Bears wide receiver on a weekly basis. Roma Dunze is one of those guys that is one of the back end, like on a weekly basis, Rome and other players and other Bears wide receivers are closer to my bench than they are my starting lineup. But Rome has the best potential, along with DJ Moore, to get over 100 yards in a game. But Caleb Williams, in order for that to happen, has to pass the ball 32 plus times a game, because these wide receivers, their target shares are so variable on a week-to-week basis. Some weeks they'll have 3, some weeks they'll have 4. 1 week, one of them will have 8. Then all of a sudden, DeAndre Swift has 7. So schematically speaking, it is a very frustrating piece to own. And while the schedule is favorable to wide receivers the rest of the way, the problem isn't in the talent of the wide receivers. The problem is in the schematics and the quarterback. He has to throw the ball 32 plus times a game. And this is what we talked about week 2, I believe, right? Where if he's not able to throw it that amount of times, 32 to 41 times a game, these wide receivers and Cole Kmet are going to be feast or famine. The reason Cole Kmet did well was because Keenan Allen was out. Now you look at it and you say, okay, well, Keenan Allen, he's got a good ADOT, but you look at and he's getting you look 4 to 6 targets, 10 targets, and then you see him with 30 yards. And you're sitting there like, what? All of the metrics for these wide receivers are okay. It's the quarterback that's the problem. It's the offense that's the problem, not the players. So while I'm okay with a couple of these players, you come down the line here and you look at what Chicago has on their schedule. You have conference matchups that are going to be incredibly difficult. You have the Packers.
They also got a lot of division games left.
Yeah. You have the Packers, which is going to be crazy hard. You're going to have the Vikings, which are going to allow a decent amount of pass attempts, but Caleb Williams is going to be frustrated by the blitzes that are coming their way. The Lions are probably going to be, those 2 Lions games are probably going to be your best chances for the Bears wide receivers to do well. But again, which one?
It's not a game worth investing in, dude. The Bears are so horrible. Hey, Steve, apparently Jerry Jones was as scared as I am of the concept of Trey Lance hitting the field, that you're bringing in a West Virginia scrub to come in to try to do it.
Wasn't he a Florida, West Virginia scrub as well?
Possibly. I don't know how that.
Yeah, he went to Florida. Up. Yeah, he finished his time with the Mountaineers. Yeah. Either way, I mean, it's a bad situation for CD, but I mean, it would be stupid for any one of those quarterbacks not to pass him the ball 37 times a game.
Sure is.
But he will do a 3-for-1.
He won't give me the Jags running back and Coleman.
Yeah,
but he will do the 3-for-1.
I'm okay.
Yeah, I would do that.
Yeah, I'm okay for that one wholeheartedly. Quick hit. I benched Monty.
Yeah, because the other part that I use is you're probably gonna get someone decent on your waiver wires too.
Yeah, and Quincy, to this end, Monty is one of those players that almost every week he is going to be a lineup lock. But this week, it's not going to be through like a massive amount of yards. It's going to be because of the touchdown. He basically is going to get a touchdown almost every single game.
Yeah, I'd rather play Monty than Waddle.
But again, Monty already played, so I mean, that's where we're at right now. Quincy, the Bears
you can't do it, but that's my answer every week. Is Monty?
The Bears are going to regret passing on Jane Daniels, Drake May, and Bo Nix. I agree.
No, the Bears are going to regret trading Fields and not giving that first pick overall to the Raiders, when they could have had 5 years worth of the Raiders' first-round picks, which are going to be top 5, because the Raiders love ruining quarterbacks more than anyone else. They could have had 2 top 10 picks for a decade, basically. That's where the Bears failed by not keeping Fields.
Where the Bears failed, it's like fivefold. Okay, number one, Eberflus sucks.
He always has.
Now,
I love that interview we had with that Colts guy like 2 years ago, hating on him when he was still the coordinator.
You look and you say to yourself, for all teams that are bad, that have bad coaches, they've moved on, like Carolina with Matt Rule. Move on. Like, get them out of here. Granted, Justin Fields is not the most dynamic passer, but we saw under Mike Tomlin and under this coaching staff, he threw for 300-yard game.
Mm-hmm.
He's a great runner. He's a playmaker. Okay. He's super young, and you gave up on him for nothing. Then you go out, you get DJ Moore, you traded your picks away. That deal for Carolina sucked too, because they ended up taking Bryce Young. But again, you look at this situation, and the Bears are really. And Caleb Williams could turn around, but the Bears are in no better situation than they were.
Caleb Williams is not going to turn around.
3 or 4 years ago because of this coaching staff. They proved that they can't develop a quarterback. Now they have a quarterback that they need to develop, and they can't develop him either. It's a terrible.
But to answer your question, I don't think Bo Nix is going to be a dude either. I think that Bo Nix is a long-term a problem. Of the 3 of them, I think Drake May is the most talented. He's just in the worst situation.
Bo Nix is in a nice situation. I like Bo Nix a lot, but
Bo Nix is a good situation. I just think he's a good enough player.
He's proven that he's okay.
He's okay fantasy-wise, not okay winning-wise.
Just traded Tracy and CD to get Malik Neighbors, Josh Downs, and Mooney. I also traded Aaron Jones to get Kenneth Walker. What do you think? While I don't like giving up Tracy, I don't mind, like Joe was saying, Landon, looking at and saying, okay, what could I give? What do I have? If I give up CD, what's the replacement value of player that I could get into? Joe, hold on.
I was just going to his next question to see if he gave follow-up answers, because I want to look at his final team before I pass judgment on that.
So looking at it, you're saying I've got Josh Allen, Nico, Malik, Saquon, Bijan, Bowers, and Kenneth Walker. I am absolutely okay with this, knowing that you have Mooney and Josh Downs if things go awry, right? And here's the situation: is that even taking everything as it is, taking it all away from the vacuum, CD and Malik Neighbors, from a volume perspective, are going to be exactly the same right now. Right?
Yeah.
They both have bad quarterbacks throwing them the ball, and they're going to get targeted 10 plus times a game. They're both extremely talented. So what do they do with them? That's the only question for both of these players. But at least the Giants have a decent enough offensive line. They have a good enough defense, and they can run the ball. Dallas can't do any of that. So I am absolutely unequivocally okay moving out of CD to get into Malik Neighbors. I don't like getting out of Tracy. I do think Tracy has a lot of value. The Aaron Jones injury, I think you moved out of him at the right time because he did get injured this past week. But I don't think that, of course he's going to have less value if he doesn't play. But Kenneth Walker is a frustrating own as well because they don't run the ball a lot. Okay? So Aaron Jones at least ran the ball a lot. Kenneth Walker doesn't run the ball as much. So while I would have rather have kept Tracy out of those, all things considered. But I don't think that your team is, knowing that your team has Saquon and Bijan, I don't think it's in a bad situation. And if I have to think about starting Ken Walker or Mooney every week, and I don't have to worry about my wide receiver room now with all that stuff, because here's the thing. You look at the quarterback situation for the Giants, the backup is Drew Lock. Not as bad as Cooper Rush or Will Grier. It's still not great. So as I see it, it's still a push in the Malik Neighbors, CeeDee Lamb because of the volume perspective. The only thing is I would probably rather, if this is Nico, CD, and then Tracy, I still think you're in a decent enough situation that the trades, push themselves, right? But I do like the fact that you went out and got Josh Downs and Mooney, because Mooney does have a lot of value and is worth a flex in most situations. How do you feel about it, Joe?
So I think you're right. I think you nailed that perfectly. Let's give the final DD of the day, Bob. As it's Monday, we don't tend to go.
The Nico thing was frustrating, Joe, for Landon.
Oh yeah, it was.
People. That was super frustrating.
I probably lost. I had a chance of overcoming the 55 points of Chase Brown, or a correction of Jamar Chase, but with Mako not playing, it fell out the window.
Yeah, you did. It was terrible for you. So sad. So
I know you want me to lose so bad. You want my playoff spot. I understand it.
That was so sad. And just to let everybody know,
you do control your own destiny. If you win out, you will be in.
We're gonna hit it at 5:30, but we'll be on tomorrow at 3:45. And this week our schedule looks like 3:45 tomorrow, Wednesday and Thursday as well.
That's what it looks like right now. So to give the question here, Jesse, when I look at defenses, I'd start by who do we think are going to let up the least amount of points? Because that's normally the best algorithm as far as, obviously, points themselves are a direct correlation, but also in terms of yardage. They tend to go pretty fairly good together. So when we look at that, the Vikings are projected to let up the least amount, like playing Tennessee. Okay, obviously a good matchup. Then comes the Rams hosting New England. Followed that up by Houston hosting that Dallas team we keep talking about. Also, that's kind of like Houston's Super Bowl, and they really, really need to show up after two bad performances in a row. Very different ways of being bad performances. Then the final two are road teams. I'll give them a push, let you figure it out. They're basically a tie on our books anyway, which is going to be Miami at Vegas and the Jets at Indy. If Miami loses tonight, I'm not super confident in either of those two selections. I really want to go with the first three of Minnesota, Rams, and Houston. That being said, the Steelers-Ravens game is always stupid low scoring, but there is no math other than history to say that's a good idea. So if ideal Ulster, everything's a choice. They're all on the table right now. It's Rams, Minnesota, and Houston are the only real three I want to look at.
And Quincy, to your question, last quick hit here. We did answer this question a little bit earlier in the show, but if we were, for any intents and purposes, to drop any one of those three players to pick up any one of those two running backs, we would most likely drop Bigsby for Gus, knowing that Gus is on a team that is committed to running the ball. But statistically, they're probably, if they're all healthy, if all five of those players are healthy, Bigsby and Gus are most likely to have the same stat line at the end of the week. So it just depends on what you're comfortable with. I would be okay with Gus, knowing that the Chargers can move the ball and Gus will be utilized in the red zone when given the opportunity. So Gus for Bigsby, I think makes sense. And I think Joe would agree with that.
I would. Now, Bob, let's try to do this right where I don't cut off your ending.
No. So team players, thanks for joining us today. We hope that all the people that need a win tonight are able to pull out a win tonight. I'm hoping myself to pull out a couple wins. Tomorrow we'll be on 3:45 Eastern Standard Time. Joe and I are both in Pittsburgh, so we'll be Eastern Standard Time. We go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday this week. If any changes come, we'll let you know, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Good luck and peace out.
All right. See.